Welcome, everybody. So the first thing, I'm David, and I'm with Sahil, and we are going to be talking about business writing today. So the first thing that I'd love to just know from all of you is if you could just throw in the chat, not the Q&A, where you're from. It's always really fun to see people from all around the world. I'm almost certain we have someone here from Europe and Asia and South America. This always really hits me. Unbelievable. India, Toronto, Alaska, Bay Area, New Delhi, China, India, 4 a.m., Guatemala, London, Anna, our panelist from Panama, Chile. For all of you who have stayed up late, Pakistan, for all of Nova Scotia, for all of you who have stayed up late and woken up early, thank you for being here. Yes, Sahil is amazing. That's exactly why I invited him. And Sahil, you want to introduce yourself before we begin?
Yeah, so my name is Sahil. I run a company called Gumroad that I started in 2011, a long time ago, to help creators sell digital content, including myself. And I've been running that since. Been through some ups and downs, raised a bunch of venture capital, bought back most of the investors. Now I run it as sort of a profitable, growing software business. We've sent around $280 million to creators, and so yeah, that's what I do. And then I write some stuff, I paint, do some other random stuff every so often.
Quick question. So when you said that you started it for yourself, I'm actually not familiar with this. So were you a creator on your own, or what was the story behind that?
Yeah. Oh, it actually fits great into this, to context of this thing, because it was a pencil icon that I designed for a Mac app. And I was just home one Friday night learning photorealistic icon design. And at the end of it, I had this icon that I wanted to sell to my Twitter audience. You know, I thought maybe that 4 hours I could have done in an hour or two if I had the source file or something like that. And so I tried doing it and realized it was really hard back in 2011. You know, this is before Stripe and a lot of the services that exist today. And so that weekend I built Gumroad, just Saturday, Sunday, stayed at home, built Gumroad, launched it Monday morning. So it was a productive weekend for sure.
Definitely a productive weekend. So before I introduce myself, here's the plan, everybody. So we're going to do these brief introductions, and then Sahil is going to present. He will present for 20, 25 minutes. I will inevitably interrupt, and then I will present, and he will inevitably interrupt and comment as needed. But before we get into those presentations, I want to introduce our three panelists. So first, I'd like to introduce Becca. She is my assistant, and she will be monitoring the chat today. Becca.
Hi, I'm Becca. I live in California. My background is that I'm kind of a French horn player and an artist myself, so I'm really curious to hear more about kind of how writing works in terms of creating a business and having writing serve your business. I'll be mostly taking notes, so I might not be in the chat too much, but I'm excited to talk with everybody.
Great. So what Becca will take notes, and then we will email you all of those notes. So you can take notes on your own, but Becca is going to write you a mini book about today's session. So that is what she's up to. And then Will, he is in charge of monitoring the chat. He is the student director for Rite of Passage, the course that I run. Will, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thanks, David. Hey guys, I'm Will. I'm course manager for Rite of Passage, building a second brain. And yeah, I'm just excited to be here, curious to hear what these guys have to say, and I'll keep an eye on the chat. And I'm coming to you from Los Angeles.
And then Anna is my business partner. We run a creativity-focused summer camp called Rite of Passage Summer Camp. We do it for 9 to 11-year-olds. So if you have any kids and you want your kids to just make, Anna is the best teacher in the world, and she's going to introduce herself.
Oh, that's nice of you, David. Hi, I'm Anna. I'm from Panama. Like David said, we both created this course called Rite of Passage Summer Camp. I'm a Rite of Passage alum, and that's how I met David. And we quickly realized that we see learning through a different lens, especially for kids, as a more playful and self-motivated experience. So we've created this online space for kids from all over the world to join and have a chance to explore their passions, find a problem that they really care about, and then together ideate solutions to this problem. And they build a prototype in a week and they present by Friday. We just did the pilot last week for the first time, and it was wonderful. And we're going to be doing another pilot in 2 weeks, May 18. We're going to be announcing it on Monday. And we would love to have kids from different places again, and for them to experience this energy of live online learning and what it is to learn in a fun and collaborative way with other kids.
So that'll give you a little overview of what's happening behind the scenes of Team David. For all the Rite of Passage alums who are here, I see quite a few, but why don't you introduce yourselves in the chat and just say hello? I'd love to see who's here. I'm David Perell. As I mentioned, I run Rite of Passage. So we have a 5-week course for adults who want to build their audience, learn how to write online, learn how to do a lot of the things that we're going to talk about in the next hour and a half. I mean, this is really what we do. We have conversations like this, and I teach in the way that I'm going to teach today for 5 weeks, but then we have just an amazing community that you could think of as CrossFit for writing, that people come together, they learn how to do a similar set of workouts, so to speak, and then everybody helps each other. But then we actually build audiences and become experts and authority figures in our niches. And then I also run a summer camp with Anna for 9 to 11-year-olds. So without further ado, what I want to do is I want to let Sahil share. He has a series of slides for you, and he's going to share. Sahil, I'll barge in at a certain point. You should have screen sharing privileges. And if you don't, I can share my screen for you, but that'll be slightly more difficult.
It says host disabled, attendee screen sharing.
Okay, well, let me change that right.
See if I can record it.
You should be able to make him co-host.
Yeah, you should be good now.
Awesome.
Great.
Good. Sweet. Let me minimize this very annoying Zoom bar that always happens. Cool. So can everyone see?
Yep.
Awesome. Cool. So I already talked about this, but basically Gumroad helps creators. We help musicians, designers, writers, filmmakers, anyone that makes digital content. We help them sell it directly to their audience, take, the vast majority of the revenue, from films, courses, music, books, stand-up comedy, all sorts of stuff. And I'm super excited about this because I think the fundamental thing that all of those people have in common, what I have in common, what everyone sort of listening and watching has in common is that we all write. We're all writers. It's very difficult. You can do stand-up comedy, you can do filmmaking, you can do all these other things, and that's what you do. But I think the base commonality that I think everybody has is writing. A sort of the form of communication is something that every single person needs to develop. In my opinion, the way I talk about it is like you're going to write just like you're going to eat. You might as well write well, just like you might as well eat well, because you can't really avoid it. You're going to spend a lot of time doing this. Everyone puts 10,000 hours towards the skill. So as long as you do it intentfully, get feedback, all these sorts of things, I think really everyone can be an amazing writer. And selfishly, I think like a world full of better writers is better for me. I have a tweet about this. I have a lot of tweets. You can go check out my account. They're a little bit more pithy than probably what I actually believe, but sort of I think the sort of emotional resonance is the same, which is basically everybody writes. It's a sort of fundamental thing if you're a designer, writer, founder, engineer, lawyer, etc. Specific to Gumroad and the way that I think about running the business, I think writing is probably even more fundamental. You can read about like the Amazon memos, and writing is a large part of the culture at Amazon, and that's all awesome. But I think we've sort of we've just tried to take it kind of on purpose to an extreme. Like how much can we rely on the skill of writing? And when we recruit people, like their ability to write, their ability to communicate in this manner is sort of like, it's probably more important than how great an engineer they are, to be honest. And so Gumroad, we don't have meetings, we don't do stand-ups, we don't do any of this stuff. We barely do email, a little bit of Slack. Mostly we live on Notion and GitHub, and I'll get more into that. And of course, because of coronavirus, but since 2015, we also haven't had an office. And the way we've been able to get away with this is by just relying on and assuming that people can write. Every single person in the company can write really, really, really well. And I'll start with the sort of the philosophy of like the way I think about writing, and then I'll sort of give specific examples, I think, of how we apply it. This is kind of what I would tweet. I would probably just tweet the first 2 sentences because it would be a little bit more controversial. But I think that the simple way to look at writing is that it allows you to sort of think through ideas before you tell anybody else. I think conversations and sort of real-time debates like the presidential debates, they're not really about ideas. I think anyone that watches that stuff is there to be entertained. Maybe they really think that it's about ideas, but I think it sort of, I assume obvious to anyone watching this that like it's not really about ideas. It's about, it's about ego, it's about personality, it's about charisma, it's about who can, be more witty and sort of like train for this very specific skill of debating. It's not about who's having the best idea at the time, right? And the reason is because you have to think on the fly. That's ridiculous. Like, we were talking about someone that we both know earlier who sort of like when he talks, he references things from all sorts of places. And that's how you sort of construct an argument. You use data, you source it, you say, hey, go watch this video. There's this bit that's really interesting. And it requires like this sort of lag time, right? Because I send you all this information and then you process it, you do a bunch of research, you construct an argument that might take you a day or two, you might have to sleep on it, etc. But if I'm having a conversation with someone in person, like if someone's like, hey, what is the right way to solve this problem? Like I would not be able to answer that question. It's like insane to me. And so when I think companies are run in this way where you're, over the lunch table, over the dinner table, like I don't think the best idea often wins. I think the most charismatic, the person with power, I would probably win a lot of those arguments, because I'm relatively personable. I can speak loudly. I run the company. Like there are all these reasons, but text to text, I think it levels the playing field quite a bit. Another way to say it is we have a lot of thoughts. We even write a lot of them out, but what actually makes it through the filter of writing, editing, and publishing is very, very little. And that's kind of how I think about working at Gumroad. Like the actual stuff that you communicate to anybody else, the more you put a filter on that and the bar sort of putting the bar pretty high, it creates like an incredible quality of all the stuff you read. And that's why our Slack is pretty minimal, and why a lot of the stuff lives on Notion and GitHub. Like I can just spend half a day reading sort of internal Gumroad stuff that we hope to make more public over time. And I just learn from it because I'm reading like really well polished thoughts. I'm not spending a ton of time like someone's giving me like their high level thoughts on all of these different things. And when you're at a bar or at a coffee shop like talking to people, you're riffing on all these ideas, you're going on tangents, and whereas with when you start to write, it's a little bit like writing code, right? Like you might have all these ideas and thought explorations and sort of different architectural ideas in your head, but when you actually say, hey, this thing is ready for review, what do you think? What you're saying is, I think this solves the problem, right? And I think that's what writing sort of requires you to do, is you have a very specific problem, and the goal of the writing is to say, look, this is the answer. And it's just a different way of working. I'm not saying, even though I might sound like it, that this is like necessarily better. It just for us works really well, and it means that most people can spend their time actually doing the work that they want to do, which is building stuff. Another way to look at it, I come from a sort of technical background, and I love this metaphor. It falls flat on tons of people, but in application programming, there's a way to scale, right? Every database, the database is sort of like the universal truth. It's where all the data lives about your users, customers, all that stuff, right? And over time, the application like Gumroad.com hits the database and is like, hey, this person wants to view this product. We need to show it to them. Like, what's the name of the product, for example? And over time, as you grow, basically that sort of the amount of times you're pinging the database, like the database can't respond to all of those requests. So you have to add a cache, which is like, hey, actually the name of the product doesn't change that often. You don't actually have to go all the way to the database to get this answer. The database is all the way over there. It's really expensive. Like, just talk to me and I'll tell you what it is. And I'll update myself like once a day, or every time the database changes, we can go update the cache or something, right? And this is how like most web applications scale in the beginning. And the metaphor I love to use is like writing is the cache, documentation is the cache, code is the cache. The people in the company, me, I'm the database. And so the more that I can build a cache that says, hey, instead of, let's say someone's like, hey, I need to figure out how to get paid or something. I'm a freelancer for Gumroad or something like that. Like if they ask me, that's expensive, that takes time, that might be stressful for them to do. They might not do it. Instead, we have a cache, which is like you go to Notion, you go to the wiki that we have there, and it says, how do I get paid? You click that thing, it tells you this is how you get paid. Boom. And so it just saves like a ton of time. Like I don't know, I have friends that run companies and they spend all their time basically in meetings or answering questions, and Gumroad's smaller typically than those, but I think it dramatically saves a ton of time. And the way that we apply this to building Gumroad is similar, in which the support team is like the database. Again, the people. They're responding to all of these queries that come in like, hey, this doesn't work, like I'm stuck with this, I don't understand this, does Gumroad do this? And the cache is the content, the writing again, right? Like all the content in our help center and on our website and within the product itself that says, hey, you don't actually have to talk to the team. You can just talk to me, I'll tell you the answer. And if the answer changes, like I can go update myself instead of have to rely on the help center. And this isn't perfect, but the goal is to get basically to make the cache as accurate as possible, so that the database can sort of be free to do its thing. And so it's a metaphor that I've tried to communicate on Twitter, and it's never worked. And one day I hope to nail it. But this is one I really like. To talk about how I write and how I sort of recommend everybody write. Twitter is basically, if you use Twitter, this is kind of what happens. But this is how we think about recruiting, support, shipping products sometimes too. But it's basically like put all of the ideas out there. Like I call them vomit drafts. Basically I vomit out every single idea that I have. This is how I wrote that, reflecting on my failure to build $1 billion company article. I just spent one Saturday, like 6 or 7 hours, just like dumping every single, this is 8 years worth of my life. So I just dumped every single idea that I had, like any interesting thing. I asked people on Twitter, like, hey, what do you want this thing to talk about? And they gave me 40, 50 people responded. And so I like tried to answer all those questions. And then I would basically, I sort of tried to format it. And then I sent it out. I sent it out to those 40 people saying, hey, did this answer your question? Again, like this article has one goal, which is to answer your question. Like, did it solve that problem for you? And often it did not. And so I would go back and do it again and iterate and iterate and iterate. And this is basically how we do everything, which is like get an answer out there and then get feedback on it, which is like, hey, this didn't answer my question. Or like, people for whatever reason seem to not get to this answer or what have you. They keep sort of hitting the database. And then over time, you can sort of like improve on that. And then the other thing I think is really important is to actually hit publish. I think a lot of folks, they just get stuck in like editing the same thing over and over again. And starting is definitely the hardest thing. Like most people don't even start. So writing, that's super key. But I think hitting publish and then paying attention sort of strategically to like how that sort of, how that affected the world, what the impact was, is also really, really, really important. And it's important in like a way that I think qualitative feedback isn't. I think quantitative feedback is like how many, did our support volume go down, or these, how many engineers applied, et cetera. Like these are real metrics that are ultimately going to be more important, I think, than the anecdotal data.
I think go back to that. I think one of the really important things that I want to double down here on and emphasize is, so I spend a lot of time at the Met in New York City where I live. It's my favorite museum in the world. I try to go once a month. And when you walk in and you go left, they have all these statues of people from ancient Greece. And they're just absolutely beautiful. Not only are the bodies beautiful, but the way that they convey emotion and then the way that the statues are chiseled is just incredible, what they're able to do with marble. And I think that one of the things that humbles me when I look at those statues is that I don't know all the work, all the process knowledge that has gone into making those statues as beautiful as they are. And I think that it's the same thing with writing. What I want to double down on here is you're seeing all of the beautiful Greek statues. You're seeing Sahil's article that was read more than 500,000 times. And you're saying, well, I can't do that in my first draft. so I have no shot here. And what you're not seeing is after Sahil spent 8 hours actually writing that, edit after edit after edit. And he actually shared one of the early drafts of that on Twitter, and it's not nearly as good as the other one, the one that he actually published. And so what I want to double down on here is that you're seeing those gorgeous statues, but they started off as just a big, boxy box of marble, and it turned into something good.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's exactly right. Like I write other things like science fiction and stuff, and I always have to remind myself that I've never really read like a published author's first draft because it would never make its way to me, right? And that's why I think with writing, like having a group of people that you're learning to write with together is super key, because you can actually pick up on some of that stuff. And there's so much learning to be had about the early work, because you're like, oh, I make that mistake too. Wait, I should probably stop, you know? And that's super, super key. And so this is what David was talking about, where I published the diff of, I think the first or second draft. I think maybe one revision cycle with my writing group on this essay is the one on the left. And then the right is the one that is live and published. And so I can read it just to give you, like, I think you can see it, but reading it, you'll really, I think, get a sense of it, which is, so I'll do that. About 3 years ago, I woke up to an article about Gumroad. Normally, I like these sorts of days, but this one was about me laying off the vast majority of my company. On top of that, I had to answer a lot of emails and tweets from our creators, many asking if they should start looking for an alternative. In the new one, in 2011, I left my job as the second employee at Pinterest before I vested any of my stock to work on what I thought would be my life's work. And just reading it, I think you can get a sense of like just how much more streamlined it is, and how like you can. I think the idea is the same, right? Which is basically I wanted to build this big thing. I spent a bunch of years building it, and then I failed to do that. And in the first one, I think there's a lot of problems, I think, with the first one. But I think the biggest one is like the reader there's just too many ideas. I was talking about that one idea. That's sort of a theme that I'll go back to over and over and over again. And there just wasn't an idea there. I was trying to communicate that, I was doing these layoffs for this company I'd spent a bunch of years building that was really hard. Now I was a public failure, like all of these things. And even you can see this second paragraph. I say like I had left my job at Pinterest. But things like, for example, like it's all relative in the first draft. About 3 years, I guess about 3 years ago, I should have said. 5 years before that, I had left. It wasn't grounded at all. I needed to so I started like in 2011. And there's all these things that I can really get into, but I think the core of it is basically I wanted to communicate that I had spent 9 years trying to build this company, and I went through I think 40 or something drafts of like how do I make this point as effectively as possible. And it was basically, start at the beginning. Seems obvious again that you look at the statue and it's sort of obvious like what the answer would have been, but basically it was like, if this is an article about failing to build Gumroad into $1 billion company, I know exactly where to start, which is the beginning, right? But it's one of those things that took a long time to get to, and there's other things I tried to do. But that's sort of a simple example, I think, to make that point of just like, it's not about like writing is super key, but it really is editing. And I think the other thing that I think hopefully you got a sense of when you were listening to that is like, I really want writing to be simple. I think, at least personally, I think the goal of writing should be basically to not even exist, so that you're in here being like, okay, Sahil just left his job at Pinterest. He just gave up millions of dollars worth of stock to start Gumroad. That's a very clear idea. The language, I don't think anyone would look at that and be like, that is a phenomenal sentence, but in the big one, in the first one, maybe it's like more interesting literarily. I use like but and about and normally, and like, like I was using these time things and I was doing in media res and blah, blah, blah. But the idea was lost, the idea, and the idea is powerful. Like I think the idea, and I think this is why hundreds of thousands of people have read that article, is because the idea is relatable. And so the more you can get out of the way, basically, the more that the audience can look directly at the idea and find that interesting or not. I think often you have ideas that, the word in fiction is often purple prose, where like the prose is so beautiful, but the ideas actually are incredibly weak. And sometimes you see this with apps. You design this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful app, and it goes viral, and everyone uses it, and it's amazing. And then like 3 months later, no one's using it anymore. And the reason might be people were not obsessed with the idea of the app. They were just obsessed with how awesome the app itself was. And that's never the goal. The goal should be that people, tell me all the time, like, I loved reading that thing. It was the best thing I've ever read, blah, 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 whatever. And it's like, no, like the story I think was really captivating, really interesting, and relatable. Like I would ask them to recite a single sentence. I doubt they would be able to do that. So I think that's really, really key. And I think a lot of people are scared of this. I think a lot of people are scared to simplify their writing because maybe their ideas aren't that strong, which is fine. Like your ideas get better over time, but only if you allow them to breathe and to really sort of be honest, I think, with them. So I talked about this, but the way I sort of translate this to building a product is the same thing, which is Gumroad is basically about a singular idea. And every business is about a single idea, right? This is the mission or the vision of the company. But Gumroad is about, like, I believe that all creators should be able to make a living doing what they love, which is creating. And they, that's really hard. So like, let's just make it as easy as possible. That's a really simple idea that took a long time for us to get to. I think the first time I was like, when I launched that Monday morning, I was like, Gumroad, lets you share a link to monetize your digital products or sell directly to your audience or something like that. It was just, and it took years and years and years. And you can find if you Google what is Gumroad Medium, you'll find like a little article I wrote, which is basically just me taking the one sentence on the homepage and like every year, and you'll see it kind of simplify and hone into that idea. But you're never gonna. I think people they think they're gonna get to that idea immediately if they just sit and think. But no, it's just like it took 9 years of me iterating on the idea to actually sort of get to that point. This is another tweet that I really like. Right, like your audience is smart and busy. This goes to the same point. You should always write like your audience is smart, because why would you want to write for people that aren't? And you're not that important to them. Like they have a goal, they want to get to that goal. They want you, I assume you or your product or what have you, to solve the problem. And so like, sort of leave your ego at the door, solve the problem, give them the answer. And then hopefully it's the answer they're looking for. If it's not, they'll go find it somewhere else. But I think this is sort of a really good proxy of like, am I wasting anybody's time? Right.
Yeah, just go back to that. One of the things that I do is when I write, I'll pick one person to write for. And I actually just have 5 people who I switch off between. So I just imagine, for example, okay, I'm writing this for Mark Andreessen. Mark Andreessen is super smart, super critical, doesn't have a lot of time, and is somebody who also is intellectually generous. So I know that I don't have to go explain what an API is because I'm writing for Mark Andreessen, and he's a really smart guy. He built Netscape. And so my point in saying that is a lot of the time when you get writer's block and you don't know, you're stuck in your writing and you don't know where to go next, it's because you don't know who you're writing for. And there's this very paradoxical thing in writing where, I see this with my writing students all the time. I will have a prospective student send me an email, lavishly written. I mean, this thing is out of the Library of Congress, and they have these beautiful sentence structures, the way the paragraphs flow together. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this person is going to be one of my students. And then week 3, right? I'm intimidated. Week 3, they're like, David, I have the worst writer's block. I can't get a single word out. And what I always tell them is if you can pick one person to write for, the reason that email was so strong was because you were writing for me. And so to get back to this tweet, just imagine somebody who's smart, imagine somebody who's busy, and it'll make your writing a lot easier, even if you're writing for public consumption.
100%. Totally. 100% agree with that. I think the other thing I would add is just, what is that? And I think it goes directly with your point, which is like, what is that? What is the problem you're trying to solve for that person? Like, right? Like what does Mark Andreessen need to learn or need to know that would make his life better, easier, smoother, faster, cheaper, whatever. Right. And so it just, again, being honest with yourself. And I think people get stuck on the words so often, right? That writing is about words, but it's not really about words. Like that's like the final step. I think like the last draft where I'm cleaning everything up and tightening, removing all the, adverbs and things like that. That's not hard. Like computers will do that for you over time. The hard part is like refining your understanding of an idea. That's really, really, really hard. And I think you're right. Like a big part of the idea is like, well, who's it for? I was in Hollywood for 6 months last year. And the number one question everybody asks you about any project is like, what's the demo? Like, what's the demographic? Is this for 4 to 6? It's like 8 to 12, 8 to 11, I think it is technically. Is this, is this young adult? Is this adult? Is this new adult they were trying to make for, it's all, it's, and you're like, I'm just writing. I just want to write about this, but it's like, no, you're writing for a group of people. And I think people are scared also of that for some reason. Everyone wants to write the next Harry Potter, right? And it's like, well, the person who wrote Harry Potter didn't know it was going to be Harry Potter. You just write for this one person. And if it happens, it happens, but it's probably not. It's like worrying about it is kind of like building $1 million company. It's a little bit, maybe it's a weird sort of goal that might reveal too much about how egotistic you are. And maybe you need a gut check on that. And so speaking of who, right? Speaking of the audience, like I'll go through a few examples of how we use words specifically to find customers. So, the sort of standard title for this would be something like content marketing. But I think the problem with content marketing is I never had done it. Like I didn't understand that that's what I was doing all the time when I was tweeting, when I wrote that post on Medium. But every time I was building a customer base. And I think the problem that I have with content marketing, one, it feels very sort of too goal oriented. I don't really like goals so much. I'm on that hippie bandwagon right now, but it's really like, I think it's too optimistic. It's like, I'm going to write this thing because I think people will read this and then they're going to be the perfect people that sign up for Gumroad and then they're going to make some money. Right. And so the way I think about it now is like, I just want to help people. I just want to help creators because I like creators. I really do. It's not a coincidence that I built Gumroad and I want to hang out with them. I want to meet them and I want to, learn from them and I want to take their learnings and repurpose them and then share them as my own learnings. And so like, that's the MO. And like, we literally have zero growth focus at the company now. It's just about like, who can I be friends with? Who can I help? Who can I hang out with? Who can I be, build a relationship with that's going to last for a long time? And it's been so much more effective because at the end of the day, you don't know who is going to be a customer for you. You don't even know, they don't even know they're going to be a customer for you. I get people all the time that are like, I have no, I'm never going to use Gumroad. It makes no sense, but I really love your tweets. And then like 3 months later, they're like, hey, I just wrote a book. Why? Because they probably saw all this content I was creating, right? Like, and all these, maybe you and other folks, like, sharing the fact that this is even possible. Like, and so I think it takes longer, right? It takes longer, I think, this approach, but like when it works, it's free and it works, it scales so much better. And so to go to the hard numbers, now almost 700,000 people have read that on Medium and it's been syndicated to a few spots. So I don't know, 750,000 people maybe have at least viewed the article. Who knows like how many people. Apparently, according to Medium, 222,000 have read it all the way down to the bottom. It has like 100,000 claps. I've only seen one story more than that. So this is some data that shows like I can do this, and across the border was a science fiction story. I didn't really expect anyone to read that anyways. And I'm sure the only people that actually read it are the people that saw it at the bottom of one of these other 2 articles. But it works. Like this is an incredibly effective strategy. How many of those 700,000 people like now know what Gumroad is? Like some of them. Quite a few. This is like the Gumroad growth. Again, I can't sort of say, oh, this is the direct impact of this, but I know that hundreds of thousands of people, certainly because of that article and definitely because of Twitter, now know what Gumroad is. And this is what advertising is. This is what Nike spends all this money on, is to just know, by the way, Nike makes shoes that are awesome, especially if you're athletic, right? And so it's the same idea. Like not everyone knows Gumroad, but like a lot of people now know that, oh, Gumroad helps creators. What? I don't know. But like the next time someone in that group of people has that problem, they're going to think about Gumroad. And I think you can start to see that there's some lift happening because of that article and other things. And it was really just me being like, hey, can I help people? Like I have 8 years worth of stuff that I've learned that I have not shared because I was afraid to share it. What happens if I share it? I'll just write for my mom. She was like my primary audience. So I just need to tell her what has happened so she doesn't lose her mind. Because, I never had this conversation with her about what had happened to the company and being a failure and blah, blah, blah. And then guess what? All these other people read it too. Same thing with building a product, like build for one person. I built Gumroad for myself, build for someone you really care about. And then there is probably other people. Like, it's statistically unlikely that you are literally the only person that has this problem.
Yeah, I wanna double down on that idea of building for yourself and then you end up building for other people. So this is something that I'm going to talk about in a couple minutes. But I have a friend, and his name is Andy. And Andy is, I think he's 22 years old. And when he was in high school, he started just building Instagram accounts that he thought was cool. And he ended up being the first to get certain handles on Instagram. So he got a handle called @Earth, and obviously an amazing handle, and just started posting stuff that matched his own aesthetic. And he was one of those Tumblr teens and spending a lot of time there. Ended up building Instagram, his handle on Earth on Instagram, to 1.3 million followers. Then launched a company. I ran into him summer of 2018. And I said, hey, what are you building, Andy? And he said, well, I've been talking to my Instagram friends, and I've just gotten kind of bored of posting on the main feed on Instagram. And there's this real problem now where I just don't like posting on Instagram. So I want to make stories, but every time I go make a story, well, it's really hard, and it's hard for me to make it beautiful. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go make an Instagram stories creator. That was summer of 2018. November of last year, this would have been about 18 months later, he calls me and he goes, hey, David, I need your help. I'm selling my business to Squarespace and for a lot of money, and I'm about to get very wealthy, and I need your help here to find this lawyer. So in 18 months, he went from this little app to this massive company. Now, when he sold it, the app had more than 25 million users. More than 2 million of them were on paid subscription, and he just bought a big house in Tribeca. And what he did was he built an app that suited him, didn't think about the market, but he said, this is something I want. I'm going to build it. And it turned out that all these other people wanted it.
Totally. Yeah. And honestly, like, the people who really want to build for everybody very rarely do anyways. It doesn't really work, I think. Otherwise, everyone would do it all the time, right? Like, that would be great. Raising money, I wanted to talk briefly about this. I will start to echo myself because I think it is really, again, simple idea, but it's the same idea. Like, look, people will discover you, people will follow you. And this is a fact. Like, most investors, the meeting now with coronavirus, the meeting is totally irrelevant, basically. I guess people do video meetings and stuff. But like, when I raise money and when I talk to, like, my favorite investors, would, like, the meeting is the thing that you do to, like, celebrate the fact that they're putting money into your company. Like, they're already convinced because they've followed you for a long time. They like your ideas. They know that you work hard. Most investments they make, they know 12, 18 months in that this stranger has run off with their money, or like has built something stupid, or like, like, this happens way more often than you might think, because obviously why would they publicize those stories, right? And so building an audience, and this is also why it's super hard. If you have a great idea, and I get DMs, I don't know, 3 or 4 a day that are like, hey, I have this idea, I'm raising money. And I'm like, I don't know you. Like, you're a stranger to me. Like, that's like being like, hey, can I have $10,000? Like, that's kind of a big ask from a stranger, right? So like, hey, why don't you go write a phenomenal article about something and send it to me, and I will read it. And if it's great, I'll give you $10,000. Like, no joke. And guess how many people do it? Very, 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 very few people. And so, when I raised money for Gumroad, like, I raised like $10 million, and I was 19, but I had, years of a blog, and, I had credibility. I had a reputation that, like, it was unlikely that I would sort of run off and disappear with the money. And that you could read my ideas. You could say, okay, he's thinking about this problem of democratizing commerce, like, in this interesting way. I haven't thought about it like this. And this is how I invest, by the way, is if I learn something from a meeting, and I would just want to learn more from that person, like, I'm very likely to be a yes. And it's kind of the same thing. It's like, investors, they don't just invest to make a lot of money. A lot of them already have more money than they know what to do with. They want to learn. They want to meet interesting people. And so the more that you can prove to people that you're going to do that, the better off you are. The other thing, I think, is when you raise money via words, when you're writing a lot of emails back and forth, and you're explaining things, and you're using Notion memos, and like, I'm working through a different, within the Gumroad umbrella, but I have this like B2B idea that I'm thinking about, and I can write this memo that's like, this is the problem, this is the solution. This is why it's interesting. And I can send it to people and then they can comment it up. And I have all this documentation that's like, this was the initial idea, just like that diff. I can literally see how I've improved over time as a writer. And I think that's super key, because then you can start drawing the line and be like, oh, like I was really complex sort of sentence structures and I'm getting simpler, but what's likely to be true is like, I can get even more simple, right? Like you can start drawing that line into the future, which I think is really exciting. And I think the other sort of caveat on this, a lot of people they're like, you're playing a game. Like, I don't want to play the game. I just want to build stuff. And it's like, well, you have to play the game. Like, this is a game. Raising money is a game. There's a few people that play the game. If you want to do it well. Otherwise, just find a different game. You don't have to raise money. But I wanted to just talk about this briefly because I do get a lot of requests about this. The other thing is just people are scared of like telling me the idea, or like, I don't know why they send me a deck or whatever. Just like, tell me the idea. I had this problem. This is my solution. I want to hire people, so I have to raise money. I'm raising this much money because it lets me, it's like, it's not that simple. And I think people like, I think they're using it as bait to be like, hey, if you agree to the phone call or this or that, like, I'll take the meeting. No, I won't. Just tell me. And if it's interesting, I will want more. And so I think it's the same thing. Like, don't be afraid. Just like put everything out there. Like, people ask me, why am I so open with the Gumroad numbers? Like, aren't you scared people are going to copy you? And people have been copying us for a long time. I'm not scared of being copied. I'm scared of someone thinking about it totally different from me. They're probably not even paying attention to like my board meetings or anything like that. And then same thing. This applies with recruiting too. It's the same thing, building an audience. Guess what? If I tweeted today, as I did less than a year ago, like 900, almost 1,000 retweets. Like, this thing was seen by 500,000 people. Like, no job post on a startup's website has been seen by this many people. And guess what? It was free. I didn't have to do any job. I'm never paying for a job ad again. If I tweeted this again, it would do quite well. Hundreds of thousands of people would see it. Because why? Because I've shown people that I'm like an interesting person. People know what Gumroad is. This is a thing that I've sort of built over time, built an audience. And so a lot of that work, like a lot of what recruiting processes are focused on traditionally, I've already done. Like, I've already started the recruiting funnel effectively for hundreds of thousands of people, right? And I'm always learning. I'm always trying to improve. The other thing that's interesting, I think, is the point of raising money this way is to get more meetings, right? You get straight to the point, you're going to get more meetings. The point of recruiting with words is same thing, same thing you're trying to do, which is to get straight to the point. But you actually want less meetings out of this. And this serves basically the same purpose, which is, look, there are a ton of people that don't want to work for you. They don't. They think Gumroad's weird. That's great, because I have time. I have a limited amount of time. I don't want to meet with people that think Gumroad is weird in the bad way. And so I tweet something like this and people are like, I assume 80-90% of people are like, no scheduled meetings, no deadlines. Like, no, I don't want this for myself. And that's great. And I think this goes to your point about building for one person. It's kind of the same thing. I think you want to alienate people with your ideas. Your ideas are not for everybody. Your company is not for everybody. Your product is not for everybody. And so I actually think the more you can alienate, the better, because then you can just focus on making something really, really awesome, like this company that's amazing for new moms. If you just had a newborn, the meetings are like, they just don't work. You have to breastfeed. You have to do all these other things. You have to nurse. Like, it's not. So something like this can be really, really appealing. And a lot of people responded negatively to this. They said, what about new dads or whatever? I never said only, but you're going to get some flack. The other thing I'd like to point out is this is a tweet that I would not have tweeted a year ago because I didn't understand how Twitter worked. This is not an accident that this tweet went viral, right? Like, I learned about how Twitter works. I learned about quote tweeting and like if you're a new mom we're hiring, like, I'm signaling very clearly in the beginning. I know it's going to be controversial. I put the money amount in there right away. This stuff doesn't happen on accident. And so this is something that I've improved at over and over again. And you can look at my feed. A lot of the stuff I say goes viral. It's not accidental, but it's also not copy pastable. Like, you can't just go do this. You're going to have to get, you're going to have to get to a similar position on a different mountain. Like, and that comes just from doing it and getting there. And then culture, same thing. Like, again, like, I want to meet with less people. I want to put as much of the culture out there, document everything, put it out there, get feedback. And then I can just do my deep work. Part of my day is like, I try to update the roadmap. I try to update all the wiki stuff. I want that to be super accurate. And so I can just do my work. People don't bug me. Customers have another reason to fall in love with Gumroad, because now it's a whole new dimension of the company that they get exposed to, not just the product and the logo and the Twitter account, but now this like internal company stuff. And then the other really nice thing about doing this is everyone, can learn from me. Like they're not just learning from like my tweets, but I can say, hey, this is like an internal note about how I got to this product decision, or how I think about memberships, or how I think about education. I was listening to your podcast with Tiago on education was phenomenal. And I made some notes, I made some edits to our roadmap based on that. And guess what? Like everyone in the company can learn like, some of these insights without having to go all the way to the source material. Right. And so I think there's just so many ways. I could talk forever about like how effective it is to write things down and make them public and share them and get feedback on them. This is an example of the roadmap and kind of what it looks like. If anyone wants a link, I can share it in the chat or whatever, but it's not crazy. And again, it looks maybe so simple, but it took time to sort of whittle it down. And, again, just wanted to highlight like very clear single purpose, which is like, I literally say, keep our goal in mind as you read. Like every single sentence, every single thing we build is about helping creators earn more money. Really simple, really, really, really simple. This is like zooming in on, you can click on memberships and, obviously there's like layers of the fidelity, so you can get into memberships. And, I talk about what's the goal of this page, just to tell you what we have to ship until we can launch memberships, which is our Patreon competitor. Why, things like that. It's really, really simple. Anyways, it's been way longer than 20 minutes. So like the last thought kind of said at the beginning, I'll just reiterate, which is literally everybody is writing. You're writing all the time. You're writing emails and tweets and text to friends. So you might as well write really, really well. If you can write well, it probably means you understand the things you're writing about really well. And if you understand the things you're writing about really well, there's a much higher likelihood you're going to be successful and maybe even happy, because at the end of the day, you spend a huge amount of time by yourself thinking thoughts. You probably spend more time with yourself than anybody else, or at least you should. And so if you have good thoughts, good ideas, you're interesting to yourself, like you're just going to be in a better place. More people are going to want to work for you. More people are going to want to invest in your company. You're probably going to be able to build a better product. More people are going to want to use. More people are going to follow you on Twitter. Like whatever your other goals are, I really believe like this. It all starts from that fountain. So yeah, that was hopefully good. I have more thoughts on Twitter. You can follow my Gumroad newsletter if you want. I've sort of run out of things to write coincidentally on that. So if you have any ideas for what you want from me there, I'm happy to do it. Otherwise, yeah, thanks for listening.
Fantastic. I love that idea of being interesting to yourself. That's a really good place to just way to think about how to consume ideas, how to take on projects. Because if you're interesting to yourself, you're going to be interesting to other people.
It's very hard to fake it, basically, right? Like if you think about who you follow on Twitter that you really love following, it's unlikely just because their tweets are great. It's because like their tweets are great, but they're great because of blank, right? They have history, they have experience, they have, they've struggled through stuff, that's what makes them interesting. And the tweets are kind of like the side effect of that, right? So yeah, it's super, super important. And it's like, just become interesting. The best writers always, whenever I hang out with writers, I'm like, oh, no one, of course you wrote this book. Like, it's so clear from your life experience that this is, it's so like happens over and over and over again. It's not a coincidence for sure.
Absolutely. All right. I'm going to share my screen.
Stop showing that.
Yeah. I really like that idea that people's art ends up becoming a manifestation of who they are. And, I think about this all the time. People are like, God, David, you're a writer. And I'm like, I'm not a writer. Like I communicate through writing, but the way that I live, I then communicate through writing, but I'm really, the way that I think is like, I'm a thinker, I'm a doer. And that's where all my energy goes, into taking on more interesting projects, into having more interesting food, more interesting experiences. And then the energy then gets channeled through the words. But to call myself a writer as how I define myself has always felt so limiting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100% agree with that.
Okay. So I'm going to share my keynote here. 1 second. Okay. So you can see that?
Yep.
Okay, great. So I'm going to talk about, Sahil talked about what do you do when you actually have a business and how do you think about doing strategy and thinking through quarterly reviews and thinking through Notion, stuff like that, and actually running the business. I'm going to talk about growing the business. How do you actually find people? So I have a quick agenda. First, we're going to talk about painting. Then we're going to talk about music. Then we're going to talk about the radio. And then we're going to talk about personal monopolies. So you've never seen anything, any kind of writing system like this. So first, I'm going to share my favorite painting in the entire world by Paul Signac, Notre Dame de la Garde. So this is what's called a pointillist painting. And I am in love with this painting. I saw it at the Met. It stands in the Impressionist wing on the southern side. I just think it's the most beautiful thing that has ever been created. Like, it's almost hard for me not to like look at this and even not get emotional. I mean, I just like the colors, and it hangs up in my room. So I have all these memories with this painting now. And I think that from a panoramic perspective, like looking away, low resolution, like it's very pretty. But what I want to do as it pertains to writing is talk about the construction of this painting. So I took these photos when I was at the Met a couple weeks ago, and I'm going to zoom in on the bottom left side first. And what you see these two boats right there? I'm going to zoom in and watch what happens. Watch the way that the paintbrushes go on the page. What you see is you see these brushes that they're not pointy. They're kind of dashing across. Each brush is fairly different from the next. You have yellows next to greens, next to oranges, next to blues, next to purples. And when you look away, it doesn't quite look like that. But once you kind of jump in, you see this pointillist style. And once again, here's another section of the painting. It's all kind of very textured, thicker brushstrokes. And so I think that this is a really good metaphor to start thinking about how we write. So with this painting, what you see is if you go to it closely, you see these dark kind of coarse-grained paintbrushes on the foreground, and then as it goes towards the background, it's much finer. And I love this sort of luminous and vibrant aesthetic that comes from this painting that I love so much. And so what I want to do is I want to remind you that your content strategy is really just that big painting made up of all these little pointillist dots. And so first, what I want to do is I want to give you a picture of your business. And this is what it looks like, where basically you're standing there and you have a solution. And there's all these people out there, out in the world. And what's happening is you have a solution and you're saying, okay, customers, I want you to sign up and give me some money. In exchange, I will help to solve your problem. And what do people try to do? The first place that everybody goes is they try to reach everybody, where they go out and they're going to say, I want every single person in the entire world to be my customer, as if you're building Amazon Prime. But that's not what we're doing here. We're trying to build internet-style businesses that give you an incredible life, that probably do multi-million dollars a year. Nobody knows who you are, and you get to live wherever you want. You have these fat margins, and you get to take care of your family. You get to buy your mom a house. You get to take your dad on a trip, and you get to make sure that your kids live an awesome life. So I'm really talking now about building internet businesses like Rite of Passage and Gumroad. So what should you do instead? Well, what you should do is you should teach. And I'm reminded of a quote from a guy named Nathan Barry. And he is the CEO of a company called ConvertKit. And ConvertKit is the platform where I host my newsletters. Really profitable business, sort of like Gumroad. The average person hasn't heard of it, but it's a very interesting company that is changing the lives of creators all around the world. And he has this great quote where he says, if you know a skill that other people use to make money, you can make a living by teaching that skill. think through the people who are well known in your industry. What do you know? Why do you know who they are? Are they the most talented? Well, sometimes, but often not. Almost always, it's because they teach. And so what I want to do is I want to ground this in teaching. So where are we right now? We're trying to create this big painting, and each individual teaching session is just one brushstroke. So what does that actually look like? Well, what you want to do is you want to attract people. Most people think, you know what, I'm going to go find people, but people will actually opt in and they will raise their hand. And as you can see here, it's a very small percentage of people, but there's so many people on the internet that your customer base can still be huge. And then what will happen is the audience will grow, and the percentage of people that you attract will still be fairly small, but they'll be word of mouth. And even as your audience grows, you'll attract more people. And then soon enough, what's going to happen is you are going to look like in our most recent rite of passage, we had students from more than 28 different countries. And if I were to look at a map of our student base, it looks something like this, where we have people all over the world. We have people in Asia, people in Australia, people in Africa, South America, North America. Even the people watching this right now follow this kind of map. And then there's always that one Australian guy who goes, "You forgot about me, mate." And he's standing there and he comes right in, and even Australian cyclist guy is right here. So my point is, okay, you forgot about me, mate guy, time to get you off the screen. My point is that I don't want you to create customers with your content. I want you to create fans. And once you actually have fans of your company, something really interesting begins to happen, where what you do is you're just in the middle and you're trying to reach all these different kinds of people. You're trying to figure out who's going to be interested in what I'm doing. And remember, you're starting off and you're saying, I need customers. But the problem is, the mistake that I see people making over and over and over again is they shout in all directions. And look what happens to the people. They shout so loud, they shout in every single direction without regard to what the radio wave or the frequency or the message that they're trying to say. And look, people begin to move away. That's not what you want to do. Instead of shouting, instead of having people moving away, you don't want to shout. You want to play music. And something really interesting happens when you begin to play music. You pick up your saxophone, you pick up your trumpet, you pick up your piano, you pick up your guitar, and you begin to share an orchestra of observations. Tweets, videos, podcasts, articles, workshops. You can reach the entire world. You can reach people in Asia. You can reach people in Australia. You can reach people in Africa. You can reach people in South America. And you can reach people in North America. And then what you begin to be able to do once you begin to play music is you have all of these different people in a band. So here you got the drummer who's keeping the pace, and all you're doing is you're starting off with just a couple notes. So you're right here, you're just playing ding, ding. That first ding is a tweet. Second one is an essay. Then what ends up happening is you're attracting people from everywhere. So now what happens to our circle of friends, the people who we want in our community? Well, once you start playing notes, well, at first, everyone's going to listen. You see it on this map. People will tune in, but you know what? Most people, people will give you one shot, but most people, you know what? It's just not right. And they're going to start listening, and this is what will happen. Some people will come in, and they'll be part of your tribe, and other people will say, you know what? I'm not really thrilled. This isn't what's right for me, and that's totally okay. And then you keep growing, people stay in your circle, and as the clock rolls and the clock continues, more and more people come around. So now you have all these people, and your filter gets bigger and bigger, where that filter is the sound, it is the resonance of your music, And look, most people are outside of your circle, and that is totally okay. In fact, it's totally expected. But as the clock rolls, what you want to keep doing is keep playing music. Tweets, articles, blog posts, essays, podcasts, just keep that guitar playing. And so what I want to do here is I want to switch into an idea that I call the paradox of specificity. And there's a great story from a book called Moneyball. And just to frame the context here is that people, whether you're a creative, whether you're a business owner, you fear specificity. You relish these wide open territories. But the problem is that instead of picking a path and making a commitment, creatives, business owners, they stay in limbo. But I'll tell you, and this is where the paradox of specificity becomes insightful, that specializing often leads to more options in the long run than you thought. And due to their clarity, specific goals galvanize support. Why? Because they're easy to remember them. And as we chase them, as we pursue them, actually the goals begin to grow. And Sahil, I'm curious for you with Gumroad, it might be a good time for you to pitch in.
Yeah.
Hasn't Gumroad expanded in some way so far beyond what you ever imagined at the beginning?
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting idea that it feels like we've actually narrowed our focus over time, but for some reason that leads to like more growth, you know? It's like, and a lot of what I've been doing actually is like going through the product, and it's like, I don't know if we need this. I don't know if we need that. Like 30 people use this, 800 people use this, you know, like, let's see if we can consolidate. Let's see if we can get rid of. And I think it's just like anything. Like people want to spend their time either with things they love or, you know, they don't spend their time with things they like. So I think it's kind of a moot to try to be like liked by 300 people instead of loved by 100. You're just going to be, you know, no one's going to care, especially in the early days. So I don't know if that feeds into that. I 100% agree with you.
Absolutely. So my favorite story about this is from a book called Moneyball, and it's goes back, and there's a story in the book about a guy named Bill James. And Michael Lewis writes, right from the start, Bill James assumed he had been writing for not a mass audience, but a tiny group of people intensely interested in baseball. So let me tell the story of Bill James. So in 1977, this guy named Bill James, a statistician who's really interested in baseball, publishes a book with the absolutely god-honest boring title of Baseball Abstract, featuring 18 categories of statistical information that you can't find anywhere else. If I just put you to sleep, I don't blame you. It's like watching golf on television. But he published his first review, and he sold 77 copies in his first year. Then next year, he sold 250. So not that many copies. But eventually, something really interesting happened. He started receiving inquiries from all these people from around the world who were intensely interested in baseball statistics. And what's fascinating is he wasn't just receiving interest from people who had a job in baseball. He was receiving interest from traders who had statistical knowledge that was actually going to help him. He received interest from general managers in baseball. He received interest from people in other sports who were looking at statistics from a different angle. He was receiving interest from people who worked in government, who were just really interested in how big numbers added up. Maybe someone who worked on American census data. He received interest from board lawyers, math wizards, all these kinds of people who maybe weren't able to hold down jobs. But you know what all these people had in mind? They were mailing Bill James their criticisms, their ideas, their models, and their questions. And soon, Michael Lewis writes that Bill James might have had one of the strangest groups of people ever assembled under one idea. And it reminds me of this quote from Zig Ziglar. What Bill James was able to do was kickstart this statistics revolution in baseball that led to Billy Beane and the Oakland A's and now the Houston Astros and all the cool things they're doing with analytics. It was this book from 1977. And it reminds me of this quote from Zig Ziglar, who's a mentor of Seth Godin, the very famous marketer and author. And Zig Ziglar says, don't become a wandering generality, be a meaningful specific. And I think he absolutely nails it. So that's where I want to talk about the paradox of specificity.
I want to jump in real quick.
Go for it.
Like one example of this was when I was writing that failure essay, it was really tempting to say, hey, how can I generalize this for more people? Like, what are the 15 lessons I learned from, starting this company, raising money, blah, blah, blah. And as I got feedback from people, it was pretty clear. Like, they're like, I don't care. Like, I just want your story. Like, what is your story? Actually, don't try to, I don't make there's not a single sentence of advice or like, this is how you apply blank. It's just like, I'm just going to tell you my story. And I think that's so key with why it worked and why it actually had widespread sort of appeal. I think it's exactly the same point. And when I write fiction, one of my teachers said, this is too vague. Like one character's experience is going to be more relevant than like 30, pick, like everyone can relate with pain, but only if you write about someone's pain, if that makes sense. Like everyone is an individual. So you should write about individuals. Don't write about generalities because no one's a generality. You're not speaking to generalities,
Yep. Absolutely. So I want to talk about wavelengths, and there are wavelengths. Well, first let me just hop in and talk about radios. So when I was growing up, I grew up in San Francisco, big baseball fan, and on 740 every morning, AM 740, that was my dad's favorite channel. And that was the news channel where we'd get in the car and at the top of the hour go dun 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 dun. And then they would share the news, the 3-minute news. That's how my dad would get his news every single morning. And I was the stubborn kid. Dad, I like AM 680. That's where my Giants play. That's where my Warriors play. I would have taped the radio to make sure that no other channel came on because that was my channel. And then when I was with friends, there was a channel called Wild 94.9 that played all the hip hop and pop music in San Francisco. So that's where we would hang out when we were together. And so how does radio work, right? There are these things called radio waves, and we can't see radio waves because we can only see a very small fraction of the light spectrum called visible light. And so radio waves are long wavelengths that radio signals pick up, and that's how you can hear what's happening on the radio. And then there's shorter radio waves like ultraviolet waves. So what you have is this is the whole spectrum of light waves, and we can only see visible light. And so what's happening on the internet? What is happening when you curate a Twitter feed, when you go and you try to sign up for different subreddits? What you're doing is you are curating your own radio station and you are finding your own radio wave. And when we talk about this word, what resonates, right? Resonance is finding people on your wavelength. That's all you're doing. We're not trying to go find customers. We're trying to attract fans who just happen to be on our radio wave. And so what we're doing, remember, we're just playing music, right? We're in a band. And we're at Coachella, and there's all these different stages, and people are walking. And when they find our stage, they stay and they become fans. But the question is, how do you create a radio station? That is the $1 million question. So there's a couple things that we want to do. The first thing that I recommend is coining a term. Okay, David, that's so helpful. You're saying coin a term. What does that mean? Come on, dude. Give me some examples, please. People, I got you. So these are two really good examples from big companies. The first is HubSpot. The second is a company called IDEO. And HubSpot came up with this idea called inbound marketing. And until HubSpot, all these people just talked about marketing. But it turned out that there was outbound marketing, and they came up with this framework where you'd go and you'd actually reach customers. And then there's inbound marketing where you have a methodology and other people come to you. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. And then there's IDEO. When somebody thinks of design thinking, they think of this company called IDEO, almost no matter what. They have what's called a personal monopoly. Both of these companies have what I call a personal monopoly on inbound marketing and design thinking. They have coined those terms. So what are the benefits of coining terms? Well, when it comes to search engine optimization, no competition. Then when it comes to, if you study some really good strategists, you know what they'll say to you? They'll say, don't try to move the pieces on the board and be the best at that. You want to actually create the board itself. That is the kind of 3D chess that you're doing when you're coining terms. You are actually shaping how people are thinking about your industry, and that is the highest leverage place to be. So what are some examples of this? Well, I talked about the personal monopoly. So this is my term that I coined, that we talk about all the time in Rite of Passage. And I said that the secret to internet marketing is to be known for something. Mary Meeker, the famous venture capitalist, with an internet trends report. There's an Acquired FM podcast, which I highly recommend, that tells the story of all these cool acquisitions in Silicon Valley, with Disney, with Facebook, Instagram. Then there is my friend Webb Smith. He has this newsletter called 2 p.m. and he's built a whole business around that newsletter. 2 p.m. comes around, I think of Webb. He made it his thing. All of them use it to actually teach their industry, and through it, they've all built personal monopolies. So the question is, when do you know that you're doing this right? And I'll show you. When people on other parts of the internet start using your terminology. You can see Michael, Dave, and an anonymous person on Twitter actually promoting my own ideas, using it as part of their language. That is what it means to create the actual board and to coin terms. So what I want to do is I want to share who are some of these, what I'm going to call from now on, wavelength warriors. Who are our wavelength warriors? It just so happens we have two of them here right now. The first is Sahil. Look at what he's doing. His pinned tweet is actually him saying, look, I'm going to share my Q&A. This is what we are doing as an organization, where we're going, how we're thinking about things, where we're struggling, memberships, impact of coronavirus on the creator economy, how we think about what to work on. And he's saying, if you're interested in this, step into our orbit. Sahil, is there anything you want to add to this?
No, I think you nailed it. I think if I were to pick a term that I'm trying to coin, open board meeting is a good one. Yeah. So that's
a very good one.
Great example.
Absolutely. And then Anna, what she's doing, Anna, you want to present on how you're thinking about this tweet and how this tweet frames all the work that we're doing together?
Yeah, absolutely. So can you all hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. I'm a former elementary school teacher, and I grew discontent with the system and with the way things were going in the school and my inability to transcend it. And I started to question everything. And then this particular tweet is just kind of like the basics of something that we all know. We've all been through this. We can all relate to this topic because we've all been through some form of schooling. And it was just a provocative way to get people to think about the things that are already in their mind, but sometimes they need to read it this way in order to realize that this is going on. And then really, if anyone goes in my profile and wants to know the things that I'm talking about or what I'm thinking or what's driving my mission, this tweet really summarizes that. It's kind of like my confusion and where I'm working from. So yeah, that's the one that I have up there and that resonated with a lot of people.
And as you can see, 17,000 likes. So what has happened from this tweet is Anna and I, if we've launched our summer camp, we have all these teachers and educators from around the world, no hyperbole, all over the place, reaching out to us saying, how can I help? How can I get my kids in summer camp? Because they have been looking, scanning the radio, changing stations. Boom. They found Anna's channel. And now they're saying, I want my kids to be a part of this. I want to get involved. And if we ever need to hire or anything like that, this is super helpful for us. And then likewise, what I do is I frame Rite of Passage as a big alternative to traditional writing education. And Rite of Passage isn't just a writing school. It is a place to become what I call a citizen of the internet. And I frame what real life is against school, in that some of the things that school gets wrong. In school, we learn in private. We follow the syllabus. We write for the teacher. You spend 15 years in school. You write for one person, your teachers. In real life, in rite of passage, you learn in public. You follow your curiosity, and you get to write for a global audience. And then you see this all over the place. People like Carnivore Aurelius. It is an anonymous account that I don't even, who knows who's behind this. But they're coming out. They're pro a heavy meat diet. They're saying meat is bad for you. The sun is bad for you. Fasting is bad for you. It's like a revolt against the modern world. And you might say, you know what? Eating meat is bad. I disagree that fasting is bad for you. I actually think that's really, I actually agree that fasting is bad for you. Or you could say, whoa, they are speaking to me right now. This is exactly what I believe. And you get right on their wavelength. Their goal isn't to get every single customer in the world. Their goal is to find the right people. Then there's David at Basecamp, co-founder of Basecamp, and they are always going against venture capital. They're always going, they have a way of building things, a way of operating internally, a code of ethics that they are loud about. And they have attracted a series of not just customers, but fans of the business. And then there's Barstool Sports. You might hate Barstool, you might love Barstool, but all of you have an opinion on Barstool after 2 minutes of scrolling that feed. That is what Barstool is doing. They're trying to say we want people to either love us or hate us, and we don't want anyone in the middle. That is finding the wavelength. So it gets back into the paradox of specificity. On the internet, the narrower your brand, the more opportunities come to you. The internet is the best matching tool ever invented. So pick a niche, learn all about it, and share what you learn by writing online. Then you'll watch your life improve. And once again, you begin to see other people actually writing about your ideas. And check this out. Yeah, go for it.
One thing real quick. I think a lot of folks, they look at some of these examples of folks who found a lot of success on the internet, and they think that it's because they're appealing to generalities. And like, if you, and that's just because you don't see the through line. You think that they're writing about everything. But then you realize, like, if you look at my feed, I basically say the same thing over and over again. You don't notice it because you're not in my head. But I'm basically saying everyone should start a business. And I basically motivate people to start businesses. That's like, if you look at every single thing that I tweet, you'll probably see that through line. Naval, same thing. Like, people think, oh, Naval, he tweets about all these things. No, he doesn't. He tweets about one thing. I'll let people figure that one out, though.
Some mystery. So we have the paradox of specificity, and then we have Joe Wells actually writing about this idea. And guess what? The idea about Bill James and Moneyball that I talked about earlier, I never read the book. I got that idea from Joe's article because Joe is doing the work for me. So now what I have is I put out these ideas about writing into the world, and all these people from around the world take my idea, they begin to spin off of it, and they begin to add to it. And then what you find is you begin to find your beats, your drum beats, and then you begin to find other bands who you want to make remixes with, other bands who are playing on that same genre as you. And what you see is right here: build for everyone and you build for no one, build for one person and you build for thousands. From Sahil. He had no idea that I was thinking about this, but then I can take that idea and I can start adding it. So what we're doing here, just to recap, what we're trying to do is we're trying to build a band, basically. We're trying to teach, to have an ensemble of education. And remember, you have all these different instruments at your disposal. You have tweets, you have essays, podcasts, emails, and workshops just like this one. And as you teach, you'll attract all these like-minded people. With every single new note that you put down, ding, 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 you'll attract employees, customers, clients, partners, media coverage, you name it. And they won't just be customers, they'll be fans. And what will happen is they will come together. You'll build this tribe of people. You'll forget about the rest of the world. You'll have your people, these like-minded people, this community, a real community of all these people who share similar beliefs. And over time, you'll end up building that painting out of a series of small little brushstrokes. There we go, everybody. Thank you.
Awesome.
So let's do a little Q&A. So for all of you, it looks like we had one person write in the Q&A already. And if you would like to add questions, please do so. And will monitor that, and we'll go for 10 or 15 minutes. So Sahil, first question for you is, how are your company documents organized? And then what mechanism do your employees use to find any arbitrary document? And Will, I'll let you take it from here on out.
Yeah, so we use Notion. So everything's in Notion. We just have a single document called the wiki, and it's just a list of like 10 or 15 different documents. You'd be surprised at how little you need. I think that's a big thing. The best edit you can make is deletion, right? So like simplify your actual operating procedures, and then you'll just need less stuff to document. People will get less stuck. You'll just need to like explain less things. I mean, you think about like McDonald's, like that's an incredibly simple menu. You don't need a lot of stuff. Why? Because guess what? Every time McDonald's introduces a new item, like, I don't know, tens of millions of people have to now learn about this new thing. And that's just people, assembling the thing, like supply chains, like just so much complexity. So yeah, it's really simple. It could be a Google Doc. It really doesn't need to be any more complex than a single document. If it's more complex than that, it's you either run a massive company. Gumroad, we're pretty big. We're about 10 million in annual revenue, so it's not small anymore. 15, 20 employees, but yeah, just one document. With some subheaders and things like that. Yeah.
Any advice on how to get over being scared and nervous to publish your ideas for other people to read?
No, I mean, you just do it. I think it's like the how do I get motivated question. It's like you just realize that like no one cares if you're motivated or not. Like no one's gonna convince you. No one like Naval says save yourself. Basically, I kind of agree with that. Like it's your responsibility. It's your responsibility to get healthy, to get wealthy, to get whatever you want. Like the only person that can guarantee that for you is yourself, really. And so. Yeah, just do it. I mean, I don't know. Publish it to one person, like send it to somebody. The truth is no one cares. Like if it's bad, no one cares. Like people publish stuff all the time that you never hear about. Like the good stuff is the stuff that sticks, in my opinion. All the failures, like I've built plenty of things. I've written plenty of terrible things. Like I ask people, like, what's the worst thing you read last week? Like what is the absolute worst thing? Can you name one thing? I can't personally. Okay, if you can, like who wrote it? Like can't tell me that, right? So like I honestly think it's like an ego issue. Like you actually think people care more than they do about you and your work, and they don't. So being scared is just an ego problem.
Will, what's the best question in the chat?
Got a whole bunch of different ones. One I've had my eye on, if somebody is a CEO of a young company, do you have a rule of thumb, or a percentage of time or amount of time they should dedicate to writing as opposed to everything else? I mean, how much of a focus should this be if you're trying to grow a young company?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think it depends, but I don't know. I spent 40, 50 hours writing that piece. It takes time. So I would say just understand that, like, I think the problem with thinking about it like it's X% or X hours a week is you're saying like I need to write a 50,000 word book or a 3,000 word essay, which is not really the right way to think about it. You should write as much as it benefits whatever you're trying to do, And so if you're really trying to understand a topic, it might take hundreds and hundreds of hours to understand that topic. Unlikely that time is the constraint though, right? Like everyone has tons of time unless you have a bunch of kids, and like, of course, exceptions apply, but in general, like it's like if I use the example of Game of Thrones, like people would be like, I don't have time for blank. And I'm like, did you watch Game of Thrones? And they're like, yeah, it was amazing. I'm like, well, that's like 40 hours per season or something, 20 hours per season. Like, don't watch it next year. I don't know. But yeah, it's, and the other thing I'd say, just like start simpler. Like don't think of, if it's really like, if you're tweeting, like just tweet, like do it on the toilet. Like you can find the time for it. And you can start, don't wait until you have a certain amount of time to start. Just start as early as you can, in my opinion.
Perfect. I've got 3 or 4 questions all about which platform should you use to share your ideas and your writing in particular. David, I know you love this one. People are asking about Medium. So maybe just talk about how to start building an audience and what platform to be using.
Yeah. So first of all, I'm going to answer the meta question, and then I'm going to answer the real question. If this is the place you're stuck, you should not be stuck here. This is one of those questions that seems important that actually is not important at all. And you should make this decision and then go on to the next thing as fast as possible. The idea that your success as a writer will hinge on what platform you're using, I don't know where this comes from, but a lot of people really believe it. And it's the farthest thing from the truth. With that said, now I'll answer the question. I recommend writing on, I use Squarespace. You could use Wix. I recommend some kind of website that you actually own with a domain name that you actually own with a website that's actually yours. And then you could have a newsletter on Substack. One thing though that I think way too many people are doing is they're prioritizing their Substacks in expense of their long form evergreen writing. Prioritize the long form stuff so that people can continue to read that, so that you have an incentive to write amazing essays there. I mean, look what Sahil did with his single essay. You could read that essay 15 years from now and it will still be relevant. That's the kind of stuff that you want to be focused on. And then I do not recommend Medium. I know that we have Sahil who wrote his essay on Medium, but I see that they're now actually dropping in different notes into his content, which, I mean, we could talk about that, but it really goes to show that Medium owns that, not him. And you want to have a website where you're capturing email addresses. Guys, I'll tell you, I've been capturing email addresses for 2 years now. I have more than 20,000 people who I can email at any moment. Because of that, because I've captured email, because I've had my own site where I can easily have this funnel, I now have the ability to work on summer camp with Anna and know that we can find 25 people without a single cent of paid marketing. My email list is the single most valuable asset I own. When I buy a house, it'll likely be more valuable than my house. When I buy a car, it will definitely be more valuable than my car. It is more valuable than all my stuff. My point is, do not worry about what product or platform you're going to use, except you should use Gumroad, wink, wink. And then what you should do, gotcha. And then what you should do is then just write on your own website with your own domain name and build your email list.
Yeah, I will not be using Medium anymore. I'm going to move my articles off there probably next couple weeks. Yeah, just do it on your own website. So much better.
Question for Sahil from Kevin. You write with brevity on Twitter, but each tweet has a lot of meaning. Why have you chosen not to expand on certain tweets in longer form writing, again, such as via a personal website?
Maybe people will realize there's not that much there. No. I don't know. I mean, I think, I write like my audience is smart and busy. And I really believe that, in the sense that, like, if I expanded on it, like 1% of those people that retweeted it or read that initial tweet would actually read the longer form thing. And I think, so that's the busy part. And the smart part is, like, I kind of want people to go on that journey. I think the beautiful thing about that painting that David showed, pointillism painting, is it completes in your head. You know, it's such a simple, if you really look, I mean, there's not a lot there, but it feels like you're somewhere, you know, so much is going on in your head. And that's kind of how I think about tweets. So, like, I kind of want to start a conversation, but then it's up to you to finish it. It's up to you to go explore that idea, spend hours if you want thinking about it. And then also I just kind of like the mystique of it. Like, I kind of like the idea that, like, there are these simple things that I'm thinking about, or these complex things I'm thinking about. Here's like a snapshot every so often. The other problem, I think, is just like the minute you start, you know, it's kind of like give an inch, people want a foot, right? Like, I've tried to expand sometimes, and then it just becomes a conversation. I honestly just think Twitter is not a great format often for conversations. It's really good for broadcasting. But that's not a bad idea. Maybe my email newsletter, that will be what I focus on. At some point, I will have to start writing that.
Perfect.
That's not a bad idea.
Yeah, Naval talks about being a little mysterious with what you tweet. I always thought that was interesting. He certainly does that. Next question. A couple of people asked this. How do you know what to play? How do you choose your music? Do you just start playing any content, or any suggestions on people just starting out, where to start?
Yeah, I'll take this. So look, you should write about what you're excited about. I mean, really, like when you paint, when you create anything, you have this vague vision of what it should be. So often you'll have like a one-line thesis, or you'll say, you know what, I have this hunch that this sort of thing is interesting. And then you're just going to paint your first brushstroke. You're going to go here, you're going to sort of paint next to it, and you'll go on these really interesting intellectual tangents as you build your business. So you'll start painting in the foreground on the bottom left, then you'll get to the background on the top right. And that's why I like the brushstroke metaphor. You're not painting an entire painting at once. You're just putting one brushstroke in. Focus on one very small part of your intellectual tapestry, right? Like, what is the cliche? Rome wasn't built in a day. And brick by brick, you end up building the Colosseum. And that's what you're trying to do here. So I wouldn't think, oh, I'm going to have a 50-point content plan. Yeah, if you're Microsoft, then that helps. But you're just a single person. And right now you're excited about an idea. And don't over direct where that's going to go. If something fires you up, if something makes your blood boil, if something energizes you to put words on the page, write that.
Yeah, fully agree. Yeah, that's exactly what I would say. You just start. That's the other thing. I think I worry that some people that ask this question are just like not starting, like not playing an instrument. And it really, no one's going to hold you to it. No one's going to come back a month from now and be like, hey, you said you were playing a trumpet. Now you're playing a piano. No, just start. Just, it really doesn't matter. And playing that instrument is going to get you to where you want to go anyways. Like you're unlikely to have picked the right answer, but the way you get to the right answer is by a few wrong answers that get closer over time, you know?
So this next question dovetails off of that, but how do you write if you're not an expert in something? Is it okay to be learning in public, or do you know, so if people have this thought that they need to be an expert before they start, any thoughts there?
Yeah, my friend Gary was talking about this last week, and I think he absolutely nailed it. Expertise is like a ladder where every single time that you learn something, you just climb one step up the ladder. And we're actually all climbing these ladders. And once you're about 3 steps up, there's all these people below you and there's all these people above you. And you're looking at all the people above and you're saying that, oh my goodness, you're an expert. And all the people below you are looking at you saying, wow, this person is somebody who I can learn from. And the problem with expertise societally is we think of it in a very binary fashion. You're either an expert or you know nothing. And the truth is that's not the case at all. All of us know certain things. All of us underestimate how many things we know that other people would benefit from learning about. And we are all climbing up the ladder. And so if you have done anything, if you have read a book, if you have gone to a movie, if you have walked around the city, then you are further up on a ladder and you should start sharing so that you can help all the people below you. So stop thinking about expertise as this thing where you're an expert or you're not, because it's not the case at all. And that belief is limiting you and holding you back.
Yep.
For Sahil, you said you have a bias towards strong writing skills at Gumroad. How do you hire and interview for it? Do you require people to apply with writing samples? Do you just read their personal blogs and tweets? How do you go about that?
Yeah, I think if they have content out there, I read it. Almost everyone has a Twitter. I also think you just get a sense, like, again, like writing is everywhere. Like they email me, you know, asking for if I have a job or you know, to apply, and you know, like you can get a very clear sense very quickly about someone's writing skills. We have a coding challenge, so the way that they frame that, the questions that they ask about it, if they have any, even the way they write their code, writing code is writing, right? And so you can learn a lot about someone's ability to think through a problem, solve a problem, just by how they solve the problem. And the writing is sort of becomes self-evident pretty quickly, for sure.
Perfect. I had 2 questions on this. So do you recommend breaking down complex topics to not lose less informed audiences, or do you just assume the audience can figure it out? Like, are you really strategic about what level of the ladder you're writing for, or you just sort of say what you want to say?
Yeah, I think say what you want to say. I think you're going to miss. I think if you aim at a very specific target, you're going to miss. It's just better to write to understand what you're writing about. And then the people that are at that level will, will sort of appreciate it. The people that aren't won't, right? I think I learned this with painting as I started painting, where like a teacher could teach, and there's things that I thought I understood. And then a year later I was like, oh, that's what they really meant. And then like a year later, I'm like, oh, that's actually what they really meant. And I'm sure there's so many layers and levels to like everything that I read that is filtered through my own experience. And you have to be like at the right moment to get the right thing anyways, that it's just impossible, I think, for a teacher to be like, I can teach it. It just doesn't work. So I think you should just write to understand the idea. That's the primary thing. Everything I think comes second.
Yeah, I just want to question the premise of that question. So many of the misconceptions that come with online writing come from a model of I'm going to go find my customers, as if it's a very active process. This is an extremely passive process. You literally write, and you write whatever's going to help you think better, whatever's going to help you enjoy writing, and you just put it out there so that you can understand your thinking better or anything like that. Like, it really doesn't matter that much. But what ends up happening is you actually attract people. They come to you. You don't go to them. You literally, you sit there, you're on the toilet, you write a tweet, and then people slide into your DMs. Like, it is as simple and as funny as that, because that's exactly how it happens. And it isn't this like outbound sales model of I'm going to go cold email 764 different people begging them to read my writing. I just put stuff out and people come back and magic happens. So for me, one thing that I fully agree with Sahil on is I want to write for people who are smart and for people who are busy, because I want people who are smart and busy in my life. And so what I just try to do is I try to write for the smartest damn people in the world so that those people become my friends. That's always been my goal writing. So that's what I do. But they will come to you.
Yeah, and it would take time. I think that question often comes from a place of impatience or like fear that they won't. And so you want them to come as soon as possible to prove that they will eventually come. But I think all the interesting stuff that happens to you, you can't make happen for yourself by definition, right? Like, that's why they're interesting. It's because people sort of knight you with these experiences. Like, you have a meeting with someone that you couldn't have dreamed, you would never have been able to meet with them because their guard would be up. You'd be one email in an inbox of 10,000. But if they read something you say, and they'll DM you and be like, hey, I like this article. And you can say, hey, cool, I'm in San Francisco next week. You want to grab dinner? 99% of the time, it's going to be yes. Why? Because they reached out to you. You're probably not going to murder them, right? And so, and that's really the filter for a lot of people, right? It's just, are you going to be one of the 5% of people that are going to be really weird or like uncomfortable to me in person? That's why people don't. That's the filter. So if you can get above that, which you definitely can if you can write succinctly and well, and you'll be surprised. I think it does take time, but you will be surprised. In my opinion, you'll be incredibly surprised with how many and the caliber of people will start to reach out to you when you put yourself out there and your ideas out there.
Yeah. Anna, can you in like 30 seconds, maybe a minute, just tell the story of how you found Rite of Passage and then how we ended up teaming up on summer camp? I mean, I didn't even know you 6 months ago. And actually the way that we became partners is a perfect manifestation of everything that we're saying here.
Yeah. So it's interesting because it was actually my husband, the one that was a big fan, and he would follow your work, and he liked the way that you would express the different ideas in writing. And he was like, Anna, you should really follow this guy. His name is David. He talks in a way that will catch your attention. And I did. I started following you, and I really liked the way that you write and the way that you would communicate your thoughts about education too. So I enrolled in Rite of Passage, and I came in thinking that I was just going to learn how to write in a different way and kind of like unlearn the way that I've been teaching my students how to write. So I was kind of like excited about that. And then I discovered this whole world of online learning and how, you know, writing for clarity and writing for a different purpose. And then just, you know, through that, I kind of got to talk to you, and we started sharing different thoughts about education, and we realized that we had this same interest. And what really surprised me was that the class really just got me to meet, and through writing and sharing my writing, which was something that I used to not do, I started to meet a lot of people that were, like you said, in my same symphony, and people that shared the same interests, and we started connecting. And that's, you know, you were one of those people. But now it got to the point where a bunch of my friends and the people that I'm talking on a day-to-day basis all came from people who were attracted to me through my writing. So yeah, and then we ended up, you know, creating this course, and we're trying to replicate something like this for kids, and it works really well. So yeah.
Well, let's do one more question. Thank you, Anna.
This is a different kind of question. Who are your writing role models and why?
Yeah, so I'll go first. I have a couple. I mean, I would just want to distinguish between different kinds of writing. The kind of writing that I'm going to answer this question to is online writing. So like there's Gregory David Roberts, who wrote a book called Shantaram that is masterfully written, but I don't want to write like him on the internet. For me, I think that the people who I admire are a guy named Eugene Wei, Scott Galloway, and Morgan Housel. I think that they are a really good trio of writers. I admire Eugene's ability to be very observational and to see things that I had seen, like as if things that everyone is so familiar with that nobody actually sees. It's a very weird paradox that I think a lot of good writers pick up on. And Eugene is very good at that. With Morgan is really good at, he has no friction in his writing. So if you actually forget that you're reading. So with the clarity of his prose, the ideas go straight from his brain into yours. And it's so easy. It's so just calm reading his stuff. And then Scott Galloway just has this splash of energy, just so much excitement. And I read his stuff and I just have fun. And that kind of combination between sharp observation, extreme clarity, and giving my readers a sense of fun and enjoyment is what I try to do. So the three of them are on my writing Hall of Fame, and I try to emulate them as much as I can.
Yeah, for me, online writing specifically, I think like the guy behind XKCD is a phenomenal writer. Paul Graham is a classic, but his essays are great, and he has a ton of them. I would say like Naval is a great writer as well. Venkatesh Rao, he wrote this amazing, I don't know if it's called a book, called Breaking Smart. I think it's available for free. And
it's so good.
It's so good. It's so good.
It's so good.
Rao is a legend because he is so, he doesn't, I don't know. It's hard to describe. He's weird. He's a weird dude who's very okay with just being weird. But I think it comes from a place of confidence because he knows how smart and intelligent he is. He's definitely probably maybe the one. Morgan Housel, amazing as well. Of course. Oh, Mike Moritz, I would say he's probably maybe not as known for his writing, but Mike Moritz is a phenomenal writer and a VC. So yeah.
Yeah. I just want to give all of you a strong book recommendation for Breaking Smart. It is, for me, one of the single most impactful books in terms of how I think about the world. And I would frame many of the things that I'm doing. And I know as an organization, Venkatesh Rao, between me and Will, and then my business partner, Tiago, who runs a course called Building a Second Brain, we are very influenced by Venkatesh Rao, and all of you should read that book. It is 10 years ahead of its time.
Yeah, agreed.
It's fantastic. Well, Sahil, thank you very much for your time today. For all of you, thank you for showing up. I appreciate it, and we'll see you in other parts of the internet. You can follow me on Twitter. You can follow Sahil on Twitter. Check out our writing. And Sahil, any closing words?
No, it was super fun. Super happy to do it.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Have a great evening.
Take care. See y'all later.